When my brother moved his entire family into my house rent-free, I thought I was helping family in their time of need. I never imagined I'd become their live-in maid, babysitter, and cook while they treated me like hired help. But what they didn't know was that I owned something far more valuable than just the house they were living in. The day I handed them those eviction notices, their faces told me everything I needed to know about who they really were. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Carmen Rodriguez, and at 38 years old, I thought I understood what family loyalty meant. I was completely wrong. Real family doesn't exploit your kindness until you break. They don't treat your home like their personal hotel with you as the unpaid staff. But that's exactly what happened when I made the biggest mistake of my adult life, by letting my brother Marcus and his family move in with me. It started 18 months ago when Marcus called me in tears. His voice was shaking as he explained how he'd lost his job at the construction company, how his wife Jessica was struggling to find work, and how they were facing eviction from their apartment with their 3 kids. My heart broke listening to him describe 8-year-old Sofia asking why they might have to live in their car, or hearing about 12-year-old Miguel's confusion about why they couldn't afford school supplies anymore. Little Emma, barely 4 years old, didn't understand why Daddy was always stressed and Mommy was always crying. I didn't hesitate for even a second. Marcus was my baby brother, 5 years younger than me, and I'd been protecting him our whole lives. When our parents died in that car accident 7 years ago, it was just the 2 of us left. Family takes care of family, right? That's what our mother always taught us. That's what I believed with every fiber of my being. My house in Sacramento was plenty big enough for all of us. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen, and a large backyard where the kids could play. I'd bought it 3 years earlier with the insurance money from our parents, death, and my savings from working as a software engineer. It was my sanctuary, my pride and joy, the first home I'd ever owned. But family comes first, so I told Marcus they could stay as long as they needed to get back on their feet. Just until I find another job, Marcus promised through his tears. Maybe 2 months, 3 at the most. Carmen, you're saving our lives. Jessica got on the phone, her voice thick with gratitude. Carmen, I promise we'll make this up to you. We'll help with everything around the house. We'll contribute however we can. You're an angel for doing this. The kids were so excited when they arrived with their belongings packed into garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Sofia immediately claimed she wanted to share my home office space for her homework. Miguel asked if he could help me with my garden, something he'd never shown interest in before. Emma just hugged my legs and called me the best Aunt Carmen in the whole world. For the first month, everything seemed perfect. Marcus spent his days job hunting, sending out resumes, and going to interviews. Jessica helped with cooking and cleaning without being asked. The kids were polite, grateful, and respectful of my space. We had family dinners every night, and I felt like maybe this was how families were supposed to work. Maybe this was the silver lining to their difficult situation. But somewhere around week 6, things began to shift in ways so subtle I almost didn't notice at first. It started with small things. Jessica stopped helping with the dishes after dinner, claiming she was too tired from job searching. Marcus began sleeping until 10 in the morning instead of getting up early to look for work. The kids started leaving their toys scattered throughout my living room without cleaning up after themselves. Carmen, could you watch the kids while I go to this interview? Became Jessica's daily request, even though the interviews seemed to be getting less frequent and taking longer and longer. When I asked how the interviews were going, she'd give vague answers about how the job market was tough and employers were being picky. Marcus started spending more time on the couch watching television than on his laptop looking for jobs. When I gently suggested he might want to expand his search to different types of work, he got defensive. Carmen, you don't understand how hard it is out there. I can't just take any job. I have a family to think about. I need something that pays well enough to support 4 people. But they weren't supporting 4 people. I was supporting 6 people. My grocery bills had tripled. My utility bills had skyrocketed from the increased water usage, electricity consumption, and heating costs. My internet was constantly slow because everyone was using it simultaneously. My peaceful home had become a chaotic household that I was somehow expected to manage entirely on my own. The real turning point came during month 3 when I realized that neither Marcus nor Jessica were even pretending to look for work anymore. Marcus had developed a routine of sleeping until noon, playing video games until dinner, and then watching television until late at night. Jessica spent her days scrolling through social media, taking long baths in my bathroom, and complaining about how stressful it was to be unemployed. Meanwhile, I was working my demanding full-time job as a senior software engineer, while also becoming the primary caretaker for 3 children who weren't mine. Every morning, I was the one making sure Sofia, Miguel, and Emma had clean clothes, packed lunches, and got to school on time. I was helping with homework, attending parent-teacher conferences, and dealing with any school issues that arose. "Carmen's so good with the kids," Jessica would tell people on the phone. "She's like a second mother to them. They just adore her." What she didn't mention was that I had become their primary mother while she sat around my house doing absolutely nothing productive. The breaking point started building during month 4 when Jessica began treating me like hired help in my own home. It wasn't just that she stopped contributing to household tasks. She began actively creating more work for me while acting like it was my responsibility to handle everything. "Carmen, we're out of milk," she'd announce while lying on my couch watching daytime television. "Okay," I'd respond, waiting for her to say she'd pick some up. "Could you grab some when you come home from work? Also, we need bread, and the kids are asking for those snacks they like." She wasn't asking if I minded picking up groceries for the family I was already feeding. She was telling me what I needed to buy with my own money for people who weren't contributing a single dollar to the household expenses. When I suggested that maybe she could handle the grocery shopping since she was home all day, Jessica looked at me like I'd suggested something completely unreasonable. "Carmen, I don't have a car during the day. Marcus needs it for his job searching." But Marcus wasn't job searching. Marcus was driving to his friend Danny's house to play video games and smoke weed. I knew this because Danny's girlfriend posted pictures on social media of Marcus lounging around their apartment in the middle of weekdays. The housework situation became equally absurd. Jessica would dirty every dish in my kitchen making elaborate meals for her family, then leave everything for me to clean when I got home from work. She'd let the kids make messes throughout the house and then act surprised when I'd ask them to clean up after themselves. "Oh, they're just kids, Carmen. Kids make messes. That's what kids do." But when I was a kid, my mother made sure I cleaned up my own messes. When Marcus was a kid, he learned responsibility and respect for other people's homes. These kids were learning that Aunt Carmen was their personal maid service. The laundry situation was perhaps the most.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Infuriating. Jessica would do load after load of her family's laundry in my washer and dryer, but she'd never fold anything or put it away. She'd just pile everything in clean laundry baskets and leave them sitting around my house for days. Meanwhile, I had to do my own laundry at night or on weekends because my own machines were constantly occupied with her family's clothing. "Jessica, could you please fold this laundry and put it away?" I asked one Saturday morning, looking at 3 overflowing baskets that had been sitting in my living room for 4 days. "Oh, I will," she said without looking up from her phone. "I'm just taking a little break right now." The laundry sat there for another week. Month 5 brought a new level of entitlement that left me questioning my own sanity. Jessica began redecorating my house without asking my permission. She moved my furniture around, claiming it would be better for the kids. She brought home decorative items from thrift stores and placed them throughout my living spaces without consulting me. "I thought your house could use a woman's touch," she explained when I found gaudy artificial flowers covering my dining room table. It was a little too sterile before. Sterile. My carefully chosen, tastefully decorated home was apparently too sterile for Jessica's liking, so she took it upon herself to fix it with cheap, ugly decorations that made my space feel like a low-budget motel. But the absolute worst part was how she began treating me in front of the children. Jessica started giving me instructions and orders as if I were her employee, rather than the homeowner who was providing free housing for her entire family. Carmen, could you make sure you pick up more of those crackers the kids like? And we're running low on that expensive shampoo I prefer. Carmen, I noticed you didn't vacuum the living room yesterday. The kids track in a lot of dirt from outside. Carmen, when you do your grocery shopping this week, could you try to get more variety? The kids are getting bored with the same snacks. She would say these things in front of Sofia, Miguel, and Emma, teaching them that it was perfectly normal to make demands of the person providing everything for them. The children began developing the same entitled attitude as their parents. Aunt Carmen, can you make me a different dinner? I don't like this one, became Sofia's standard response to meals I'd spent my time and money preparing after working all day. Aunt Carmen, my tablet needs to be charged, and I can't find the charger, Miguel would announce, as if it were my responsibility to keep track of his belongings. Aunt Carmen, Mommy says you need to buy me new shoes because these ones are too small, Emma would declare, having learned from her mother that I was apparently responsible for clothing her, as well as housing and feeding her. The financial burden was becoming crushing. I was spending nearly twice my normal amount on groceries, utilities, household supplies, and miscellaneous expenses for 4 additional people. Marcus and Jessica weren't contributing anything toward food, utilities, cleaning supplies, or any of the increased costs their presence created. They acted like their mere presence was contribution enough. When I finally worked up the courage to have a conversation about shared expenses during month 6, both Marcus and Jessica reacted like I was being unreasonable and selfish. Carmen, we're already so grateful for what you're doing, Marcus said, using that manipulative tone he'd perfected as a child when he wanted to avoid consequences. We don't want to be a burden, but we're just not in a position to contribute financially right now. Right now had been going on for 6 months with no end in sight. Jessica was even more direct in her dismissal of any financial responsibility. Carmen, we didn't ask to be in this situation. We're doing the best we can. If money is really that tight for you, maybe you need to look at your own spending habits. My own spending habits. I was working 50 hours a week to support 6 people, and Jessica was suggesting that I needed to budget better. The 7th month brought what I can only describe as complete subjugation. I had become a live-in servant in my own home, working full-time to support people who treated me like their personal staff. Every morning before work, I was making breakfast for 6 people, packing 3 school lunches, and making sure everyone had what they needed for their day. After work, I was grocery shopping, cooking dinner, helping with homework, and cleaning up after everyone else's messes. Meanwhile, Marcus and Jessica had settled into a comfortable routine of sleeping late, eating the food I provided, using the utilities I paid for, and relaxing in the home I owned while contributing absolutely nothing to the household except additional work for me. The children had been completely corrupted by their parents' attitude. They no longer said please or thank you for anything I did for them. They demanded rather than asked. They complained when I didn't anticipate their needs quickly enough. They had learned from Marcus and Jessica that I existed to serve them. Carmen, I'm hungry. Can you make me a sandwich? Became the standard afternoon greeting when they got home from school. Carmen, you forgot to wash my favorite shirt. I wanted to wear it today, Sofia complained one morning, as if doing her laundry was my assigned responsibility. Carmen, why didn't you buy the good cookies? These ones are gross, Miguel said about the perfectly fine cookies I'd purchased with my own money for children who weren't mine. The evenings were the worst. After working all day and handling all the household responsibilities, I'd finally sit down to relax, only to have Jessica appear, with a list of things she needed me to do. Carmen, could you run to the store? We're out of milk and bread again. Carmen, the kids need help with their homework, and I have a headache. Carmen, could you tidy up the living room? My mother is coming by tomorrow. Her mother was coming by to see the beautiful house that Jessica was living in rent-free, and Jessica wanted me to clean it so she could take credit for maintaining a nice home. By month 8, I was having panic attacks before coming home from work. My own house had become a source of stress and anxiety rather than the peaceful sanctuary it had been before. I was exhausted all the time, overwhelmed by the endless demands on my time and money, and resentful of the people I had tried so hard to help. But the worst part wasn't the work or the money or even the lack of appreciation. The worst part was how they had begun talking about me when they thought I couldn't hear them. "Carmen's been really moody lately," Jessica would tell Marcus. "I think she's going through something." "Yeah, she seems stressed about money," Marcus would respond. "Maybe she's having problems at work." They would discuss my supposed problems as if they weren't the direct cause of every single one of my stressors. They had convinced themselves that my exhaustion and frustration had nothing to do with them and everything to do with my personal shortcomings. Jessica began making comments to her friends about how difficult it was to live with me. "Carmen's just not used to having family around," she'd say on phone calls she made no effort to keep private. "She's very set in her ways. It's been an adjustment for all of us. An adjustment for all of them. They were living rent-free in a beautiful home, eating food they didn't pay for, using utilities they didn't contribute to, and being cared for by someone who asked nothing in return except basic respect. What exactly was the adjustment they were making?" The 9th month brought the final insult that made me realize I had to take action. Marcus announced that they had decided to enroll Emma in a private preschool program because the public options weren't good enough for their daughter. "It's only $400 a month," he said casually. "Carmen, you don't mind covering it, do you? It's really important for Emma's development." $400 a month for preschool for a child who wasn't mine, funded by my income, while her parents contributed nothing to the household. They had reached a level of entitlement that was beyond my comprehension. When I expressed shock at this assumption, Jessica jumped in with her manipulation tactics. "Carmen, we thought you cared about Emma's future. This program will give her such a good foundation for kindergarten." They were using my love for the children as a weapon against me, knowing I wouldn't want to deny Emma opportunities for education and growth, but they weren't asking me to contribute to their child's education as a loving aunt might choose to do. They were demanding that I fund their parenting decisions, while they contributed nothing to their own children's welfare. That night, I sat in my home office, the same office that Sofia had taken over for her homework space without asking, and I realized that I had allowed my family to turn me into their unpaid servant. I was working full-time to support people who showed me no gratitude, no respect, and no consideration for my own needs and well-being. But what Marcus and Jessica didn't know was that I had been keeping detailed records of every expense they had caused, every hour of unpaid labor I had provided, and every instance of their disrespectful treatment. What they also didn't know was that my generous nature had limits, and my patience had officially run out. Most importantly, what they didn't realize was that I owned much more than just the house they were living in rent-free. I owned something that would give me the power to change this situation permanently. The time had come to remind my family that kindness shouldn't be mistaken for weakness, and that every arrangement has terms that can be revised. It was time for Marcus and Jessica to learn that I wasn't just their unpaid servant. I was their landlord, and landlords have options that servants don't have. The breaking point came during month 10, when Jessica decided to throw a birthday party for Emma at my house without asking my permission. I came home from work on a Friday evening to find my living room transformed into what looked like a daycare center explosion. Balloons covered every surface, streamers hung from my light fixtures, and glittery decorations sparkled on furniture that had taken me years to carefully select and arrange. "Surprise!" Jessica called out cheerfully when she saw my shocked expression. "I decided to throw Emma a proper 4th birthday party. Isn't it wonderful?" 20 children and their parents were running through my house, using my bathrooms, eating food off my dishes, and treating my home like a public playground. The noise was overwhelming, and the mess was already substantial, even though the party had apparently just started. "Jessica, when did you plan this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level while watching a strange child wipe chocolate frosting on my white couch. "Oh, just this week." I sent invitations to all the kids in Emma's preschool class. Everyone was so excited to see where we live now. Where we live. She had invited strangers into my home so she could show off the beautiful house she was living in as if it belonged to her. She was taking credit for my success, my hard work, my careful financial planning, and presenting it as her own lifestyle to people who didn't know the truth. Marcus appeared from the kitchen carrying a tray of appetizers. Carmen, great timing. Could you help Jessica serve the food? There's so much to do. Could I help serve food at a party I didn't know about, held in my house for people I'd never met, paid for with money I'd never agreed to spend? The audacity was breathtaking. Who paid for all this food? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Well, I used your credit card, Jessica said casually. I hope you don't mind. I'll pay you back when things get better for us financially. She had used my credit card without permission to throw a party I didn't know about in my house for 20 families I'd never met. The violation of trust was so complete that I stood frozen for a moment, unable to process the sheer boldness of what she had done. Jessica, you used my credit card? Without asking me? Carmen, don't make a scene, she whispered urgently, glancing at the other parents who were beginning to notice our conversation. We can talk about this later. Right now we have guests. We have guests. In my house. Using my things. Eating food purchased with my money, while I was being told not to make a scene about my own credit card being used without my permission. The next 3 hours were torturous. I smiled politely at strangers who complimented Jessica on her beautiful home and lovely party. I helped clean up messes made by children whose parents assumed I was the hired help, rather than the homeowner. I listened to Jessica accept praise for being such a wonderful hostess and mother, while I did the actual work of managing the chaos. Your sister-in-law is so lucky to have such a nice place to live, one mother commented to Marcus. And Jessica throws such wonderful parties. Yes, we're very fortunate, Marcus replied without correcting the assumption that he owned the house or contributed to the party expenses. When the last guest finally left and the children were in bed, I confronted Jessica about the credit card incident. Her response revealed a level of entitlement that shocked even me. Carmen, it was only $300. Emma deserves to have nice birthday memories. I would have asked, but I knew you'd probably say no, and I didn't want to disappoint her. Only $300. She had spent $300 of my money without permission, because she assumed I would say no if asked. She had deliberately circumvented my consent because she knew her request was unreasonable. Jessica, you stole my credit card and spent my money without asking. I didn't steal anything. The card was just sitting on your kitchen counter. I borrowed it. There's a difference. Borrowed. She had borrowed my credit card to make purchases I never agreed to for a party I never approved of in my house, and she saw nothing wrong with this logic. Marcus's response was equally infuriating. Carmen, family helps family. Emma's only going to turn 4 once. Couldn't you just be happy that she had a nice party? Family helps family. But only one member of this family was actually helping anyone. Everyone else was taking, demanding, and exploiting my generosity while contributing nothing in return. The credit card incident marked the beginning of what I now recognize as financial abuse. Over the following weeks, Jessica began using my cards regularly for various purchases, always with the excuse that she would pay me back eventually. Groceries, clothing for the kids, household items, entertainment expenses, and even personal care products for herself. I just grabbed a few things for myself while I was buying groceries, she'd explain, showing me bags full of expensive cosmetics and hair products. I haven't felt pretty in so long, and I thought you wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind funding her beauty routine while she contributed nothing to the household expenses. I wouldn't mind working overtime to support 6 people while she spent my money on luxuries for herself. The situation escalated when Marcus began using my car without asking. I would wake up in the morning to find my driveway empty and no explanation for where my vehicle had gone. When I called Marcus to ask about it, he'd act like I was being unreasonable. Carmen, I just needed to run a few errands. You were asleep, and I didn't want to wake you. I'll have it back before you need it for work. But he didn't always have it back in time. There were mornings when I had to call in late to work because my own car wasn't available for my commute. There were evenings when I couldn't go grocery shopping because Marcus had taken my vehicle to visit friends or handle his mysterious errands that never seemed to involve actual job searching. Why don't you just take an Uber if you need to go somewhere? Jessica suggested when I complained about this arrangement. It's more convenient anyway. I should take Uber rides paid for with my own money so that Marcus could use my car for activities that didn't benefit our household in any way. The logic was so twisted that I began to question my own sanity. Month 11 brought a new low when Jessica announced that she had signed the children up for various extracurricular activities without consulting me about the costs or transportation requirements. Sofia is starting piano lessons, Miguel is joining the soccer team, and Emma is doing dance classes, she declared proudly. It's so important for children to have diverse experiences. How much do these activities cost? I asked, dreading the answer. Well, piano lessons are $80 a month, soccer registration and equipment will be about $200, and dance classes are $60 a month plus costume fees. But it's an investment in their futures. An investment of my money in activities I hadn't agreed to fund, requiring transportation I hadn't agreed to provide, scheduled during times that would interfere with my work and personal commitments. Jessica, who's going to drive them to these activities? Well, I assumed you wouldn't mind helping out. The piano lessons are right after school, so you could pick up Sofia on your way home from work. Soccer practice is on weekends, so that works perfectly with your schedule. And dance class is on Wednesday evenings. My schedule. She had rearranged my entire weekly routine around activities I'd never agreed to support for children whose parents were contributing nothing to their welfare. I had become their unpaid chauffeur, in addition to their unpaid maid, cook, and financial provider. The audacity reached new heights when Marcus informed me that he had invited his unemployed friend Danny to move in with us temporarily. Danny's going through a rough patch, Marcus explained. His girlfriend kicked him out, and he just needs a place to crash for a few weeks while he gets back on his feet. A few weeks. Just like Marcus's original timeline of 2 or 3 months had stretched into nearly a year of exploitation and abuse. Marcus, there's no room for another person in this house. He can sleep on the couch. Danny's not picky, he just needs somewhere to stay. So now I would be supporting 7 people instead of 6, with even less privacy in my own home and even more mess to clean up after working all day. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Danny cannot move in here. Marcus's reaction revealed how completely he had lost perspective on our arrangement. Carmen, I can't believe how selfish you're being. Danny is my best friend. Families should be willing to help families' friends. Selfish. I was selfish for refusing to house and feed another unemployed adult who would contribute nothing while I worked to support an ever-growing household of people who treated me like their personal servant. Jessica supported Marcus's position with her own twisted logic. Carmen, it's just one more person. What difference does it make? You have plenty of space, and Danny could actually help out around the house. Help out around the house. Like Marcus helped out by sleeping until noon and playing video games all day. Like Jessica helped out by using my credit cards and redecorating my home without permission. When I stood firm in my refusal to house Danny, Marcus accused me of breaking up his friendship and ruining his support system during a difficult time in his life. You don't understand what it's like to be unemployed and stressed about providing for your family, he said with genuine anger in his voice. Danny is the only person who gets what I'm going through. What he was going through. Marcus was living rent-free in a beautiful home, eating food he didn't pay for, using utilities he didn't contribute to, and being cared for by someone who asked nothing in return except basic respect. His stress about providing for his family was non-existent because I was providing for his family. The manipulation tactics became more sophisticated as my resistance to their demands increased. Jessica began using the children as emotional weapons, coaching them to make requests she knew I couldn't refuse without feeling guilty. Aunt Carmen, Mommy says we might not be able to stay here much longer because you're getting tired of us, Sofia said one evening while I was helping her with homework. Are you going to make us leave? The conversation was clearly scripted. Sofia was 8 years old, but she delivered the lines with the practiced precision of a child who had been coached on exactly what to say and how to say it. Sweetheart, who told you that? Mommy was talking to Daddy about how you don't want us here anymore. She said maybe we should start looking for somewhere else to live because you're not happy. Jessica was using my genuine love for the children to manipulate me into feeling guilty for having boundaries. She was teaching them that my reasonable expectations for respect and contribution were signs that I didn't love them anymore. Miguel tried a similar approach a few days later. Aunt Carmen, why don't you like us anymore? I love you very much, Miguel. Why would you think I don't like you? Because Mommy says you complain about everything we do. She says you're always angry now. I was always angry because their parents were exploiting my generosity and teaching them to be entitled and disrespectful. But these children didn't understand the complex dynamics their parents had created. They only knew that the adults were fighting, and somehow it was connected to their presence in my home. Jessica's masterpiece of manipulation came when she arranged for the children to make me handmade gifts expressing their gratitude for my care. The gifts were beautiful and heartfelt, clearly created with genuine love and appreciation. But the timing was suspicious, coming immediately after I had expressed frustration about the household expenses and lack of contribution from Marcus and Jessica. "We made these for you because we love you so much," Emma said, presenting me with a drawing of our family standing in front of my house. "Thank you for taking care of us." The children's love was real and pure. But Jessica was weaponizing that love to make me feel guilty for wanting reasonable boundaries and basic respect from their parents. "See how much the kids love living here?" Jessica said after the children had gone to bed. "This is the most stable home they've ever had. It would be so traumatic for them to have to move again." Emotional blackmail. She was threatening to traumatize the children by moving them out of my home if I continued to expect their parents to contribute to household expenses or show basic respect for my property and boundaries. Marcus joined the manipulation campaign with his own version of emotional warfare. "Carmen, I know we've been going through a rough patch, but things are going to get better soon. I have some really promising leads on jobs." Promising leads. For 11 months, Marcus had been having promising leads that never materialized into actual employment. But every time I reached my breaking point with their behavior, suddenly there were new opportunities on the horizon that required just a little more patience from me. "This one company is really interested in me," he continued. "The manager said I'm exactly what they're looking for. I should hear back by next week." Next week came and went with no job offer, no follow-up interview, and no explanation for why this promising opportunity had disappeared like all the others. The psychological pressure of being manipulated by people I loved was taking a serious toll on my mental health. I was having trouble sleeping, losing weight from stress, and struggling to concentrate at work. My friends noticed that I seemed exhausted and overwhelmed, but I was too embarrassed to explain that my own family was exploiting me in my own home. "You seem really stressed lately," my friend Maya observed during one of our rare coffee dates. "Is everything okay at work?" How could I explain that work was my escape from the dysfunction in my personal life? How could I admit that I was being financially and emotionally abused by people I had tried to help? "Just family stuff," I said vaguely, which was technically true even if it didn't convey the severity of the situation. "Maybe you need a vacation," Maya suggested. "When's the last time you did something just for yourself?" Just for myself. I couldn't remember the last time I had done anything just for myself. Every decision I made, every dollar I spent, every hour of my free time was dedicated to managing the needs and demands of 6 people who contributed nothing to their own welfare. The idea of a vacation was laughable. Even if I could afford to travel after supporting 6 people for nearly a year, I couldn't leave Marcus and Jessica unsupervised in my house. Based on their track record of using my credit cards without permission and making major decisions without consulting me, I couldn't trust them to respect my property while I was away. Month 12 arrived with a new level of entitlement that defied all logic and reason. Jessica announced that she had decided to get a puppy for the children as a belated Christmas gift. "The kids have been asking for a dog for months," she explained. "I found this adorable golden retriever puppy, and the breeder is willing to let us have her for only $800. Only $800 for a puppy that would require food, veterinary care, training, and supplies, all of which would become my financial responsibility since Marcus and Jessica contributed nothing to household expenses. "Jessica, we can't get a puppy. This house isn't set up for a dog, and I don't have time to train and care for a pet." "Carmen, you're being so negative. Dogs are great for children. They teach responsibility and provide companionship. Besides, the kids would help take care of her. The same kids who couldn't clean up their toys or put their dishes in the dishwasher We're going to help take care of a puppy that would require constant attention and training. Who's going to walk this dog during the day while everyone is at school and work? I'll handle that, Jessica said confidently. I'm home all day anyway. Jessica, who couldn't be bothered to do her own laundry or clean up after her own meals, was going to take responsibility for house training and exercising a puppy. When I firmly refused to allow a dog in my house, Jessica's reaction was swift and manipulative. She told the children that I had refused to let them have a puppy because I didn't want them to be happy. Aunt Carmen said no puppy. I heard her tell Emma, "She doesn't think you kids deserve to have a pet." Once again, she was using the children as weapons, making me the villain in their story while she positioned herself as the loving mother who wanted to give them everything but was being blocked by their mean aunt. The children's disappointed faces broke my heart, but I knew that adding a puppy to this dysfunctional household would only create more work and expenses for me, while Marcus and Jessica contributed nothing to the animal's care. The final straw came during month 13, when I discovered that Marcus had been using my personal information to apply for credit cards and loans without my knowledge. I only found out when I received a credit report notification showing multiple inquiries I hadn't authorized. "Marcus, did you apply for credit using my information?" His guilty expression told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Carmen, I was just trying to help our situation. We need money to get back on our feet, and your credit is so much better than mine." My credit was better than his because I paid my bills on time and didn't take financial risks I couldn't afford. He had destroyed his own credit through poor decisions, and now he was trying to destroy mine as well. "Marcus, that's identity theft. You could go to jail for that." "Carmen, you're being dramatic. It's not identity theft when it's family." "I was going to tell you about it once I got approved for something." Family. The magic word that Marcus and Jessica used to justify every violation of my boundaries, every exploitation of my generosity, and every abuse of my trust. Did you get approved for anything? Not yet, but I have a good feeling about a few applications. Once we get some money coming in, we can start contributing to expenses around here. Contributing to expenses. After 13 months of taking everything I offered and demanding more, Marcus thought the solution was to destroy my credit so he could access more money to eventually maybe contribute to household costs. The credit report showed that he had applied for 3 credit cards and 2 personal loans using my information. None of the applications had been approved, but the inquiries would remain on my credit report for 2 years, potentially affecting my ability to get favorable rates on future loans or credit cards. "Marcus, you've damaged my credit score with these inquiries." "Carmen, it's just a few points. Credit scores go up and down all the time. You're making this into a bigger deal than it is." Just a few points of my carefully maintained credit score that I had worked years to build. Just the foundation of my financial stability that he had jeopardized without my knowledge or consent. When I demanded that Marcus and Jessica start looking for their own place to live, the manipulation tactics reached new levels of intensity. Jessica began crying daily about how traumatic it would be for the children to move again. Marcus started having mysterious health problems that supposedly prevented him from working or house hunting. "My back has been killing me," he would complain, lying on my couch with heating pads and pain medication. "The doctor says I need to take it easy for a few weeks." Convenient timing for a back injury that appeared immediately after I asked him to start contributing to household expenses or find alternative housing arrangements. Jessica's tears became a daily performance designed to make me feel guilty for wanting my own house back. "Carmen, I don't know what we did wrong. We've tried so hard to be helpful and respectful. I thought family meant something to you." Family meant something to me. That's why I had opened my home to them when they needed help. That's why I had supported 6 people for over a year, without asking for anything in return except basic respect and consideration. But family also meant reciprocity, appreciation, and mutual support. It meant contributing to solutions, rather than only creating problems. It meant treating each other with kindness and respect, rather than exploitation and manipulation. The people living in my house weren't behaving like family. They were behaving like parasites who had found a perfect host and were determined to drain every resource available while giving nothing back. As month 14 began, I realized that my attempts to reason with Marcus and Jessica were futile. They had no intention of changing their behavior because the current arrangement worked perfectly for them. They had housing, food, utilities, childcare, transportation, and financial support without contributing a single dollar or hour of labor to their own welfare. Why would they voluntarily give up such a perfect deal? Why would they choose to work, pay rent, and take responsibility for their own lives when they had successfully convinced someone else to do all of that for them? The answer was simple. They wouldn't. Which meant that if I wanted this situation to change, I would have to be the one to change it. But what Marcus and Jessica didn't realize was that their exploitation had taught me something valuable about myself. I was stronger than I had ever imagined. I was more capable than they wanted me to believe. And I had resources they didn't even know existed. For 13 months, I had been thinking of myself as their victim. But victims don't own multiple properties. Victims don't have the legal power to change their circumstances. Victims don't have the financial resources to take control of their situation. I wasn't a victim. I was a property owner who had been too generous for too long. And property owners have options that tenants don't have, especially when those tenants haven't been paying rent. The revelation came to me on a Tuesday evening in month 14, while I was sitting in my home office, staring at bank statements and credit card bills that showed the true cost of my family's presence. I had been so focused on the daily stress and emotional manipulation that I had forgotten something crucial about my financial situation. Something that would change everything. 3 years ago, when I bought my house with the insurance money from our parents' death, I had also purchased 2 rental properties as investment opportunities. The insurance settlement had been substantial, and my financial advisor had recommended diversifying my investments in real estate. I had bought a duplex in Midtown Sacramento and a small single-family home in a developing neighborhood, both of which I rented out to reliable tenants who paid market rates and respected the properties. Those rental properties had been generating steady income for 3 years, income that I had been automatically reinvesting into improvements and savings. I rarely thought about them because my property management company handled all the day-to-day operations, collecting rent, managing maintenance, and dealing with tenant issues. The monthly reports arrived by email, and I filed them away without much consideration since the properties were performing exactly as expected. But as I sat there calculating how much money Marcus and Jessica's presence had cost me over the past 13 months, I realized that I wasn't just Carmen, the software engineer who was being taken advantage of by her family. I was Carmen, the property owner, Carmen, the landlord, Carmen, the person who had legal options that tenants feared most. I pulled up the files on my rental properties and smiled for the first time in months. The duplex was currently renting for $2,800 per month, split between 2 tenants who paid $1,400 each. The single-family home was generating $1,800 monthly from a young couple who maintained the property beautifully and had never been late with a payment. $4,600 in monthly rental income that I had completely forgotten about while I struggled to support 6 people who contributed nothing. Money that proved I wasn't the financially stressed victim Marcus and Jessica believed me to be. But more importantly, I realized that both of my rental properties would be perfect for a family of 5 who needed affordable housing. The duplex had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, exactly the right size for Marcus, Jessica, and their 3 children. The single-family home had 4 bedrooms, and would give them even more space than they currently enjoyed in my house. The wheels in my head began turning as I considered the possibilities. My current tenants' leases would be expiring within the next few months. Instead of renewing with strangers, I could offer Marcus and Jessica the opportunity to rent one of my properties at market rates. They would have their own home, their own space, and their own responsibilities while I regained control of my life and my house. It was the perfect solution. They would get stable housing that they could afford once Marcus found employment, and I would get my peace and privacy back while maintaining a family relationship on more appropriate terms. Everyone would benefit from clear boundaries and fair expectations. I spent the next several days researching the details of my options. The duplex tenants had already given notice that they would be moving out at the end of their lease in 6 weeks, citing a job relocation to another state. The timing was absolutely perfect. I could offer Marcus and Jessica the duplex at a reduced rate, perhaps $2,200 instead of the market rate of $2,800. That would save them $600 monthly compared to what strangers would pay, while still requiring them to take financial responsibility for their own housing costs. The more I thought about this plan, the more excited I became. It addressed every problem in our current arrangement. Marcus and Jessica would have their own space to decorate and manage however they wanted. The children would have stability and wouldn't have to change schools. Since the duplex was in the same district, I would regain control of my home and my finances, while still helping my family in a way that encouraged their independence rather than their dependence. I decided to present this opportunity to them as a generous gift, emphasizing how much money I was saving them by offering family rates instead of market prices. I would frame it as a way for them to build credit and establish rental history while working toward eventual homeownership. Everyone would benefit from this arrangement. On Friday evening, I asked Marcus and Jessica to sit down with me for a family meeting. I had prepared a presentation showing them pictures of the duplex, highlighting its features and benefits, and explaining how this opportunity would help them establish independence while maintaining our family relationships. I have some exciting news to share with you both, I began, pulling out printed photos of the duplex exterior and interior. I think I've found the perfect solution for our housing situation. Marcus and Jessica exchanged glances that I couldn't quite interpret. They seemed nervous rather than excited, which surprised me since I was about to offer them an incredible opportunity. One of my rental properties is becoming available next month, I continued, spreading the photos across the coffee table. It's a beautiful 3-bedroom duplex in a great neighborhood with excellent schools. I'd like to offer it to you at a significant discount from market rates. Jessica picked up one of the photos, studying it with a frown. Carmen, what do you mean by rental property? You own other houses? The question caught me off guard. I had assumed they knew about my real estate investments, but apparently I had never mentioned them during the chaos of the past 13 months. Yes, I own 2 rental properties. I bought them as investments when I purchased this house. They've been generating rental income for 3 years. Marcus's face went through several expressions very quickly. Surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like anger. Carmen, you own rental properties, and you've been complaining about money for the past year? Complaining about money. I had been pointing out that supporting 6 people was expensive, not complaining about being unable to afford it. There was a significant difference between those 2 situations. Marcus, I haven't been complaining about money. I've been trying to help you understand that household expenses increase substantially when the household grows from 1 person to 6 people. But you have rental income, Jessica said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I had learned to recognize as the prelude to demands and manipulation. How much rental income? I hadn't planned to discuss the specific financial details, but their reactions were making me uncomfortable. The properties generate enough income to cover their mortgages and provide some additional cash flow. How much additional cash flow? Marcus pressed. That's not really the point, I said, trying to redirect the conversation back to my generous offer. The point is that I can offer you a beautiful place to live at below market rates. The duplex normally rents for $2,800, but I'd be willing to let you have it for $2,200. The silence that followed was not the grateful excitement I had expected. Marcus and Jessica stared at me like I had just insulted them, rather than offered them an incredible opportunity. You want us to pay rent? Jessica said slowly, as if the concept was foreign to her. Well, yes. That's how rental properties work. Tenants pay rent to landlords in exchange for housing. But we're family, Marcus said. Why would you charge your own brother rent when you clearly don't need the money? The entitlement in his voice was breathtaking. After 13 months of living rent-free in my house while I supported his entire family, Marcus was offended by the suggestion that he should pay for housing like every other adult in the world. Marcus, paying rent is normal. It's what responsible adults do. I'm offering you a significant discount as a family member, but yes, I expect you to contribute to your own housing costs. Jessica's response revealed how completely disconnected from reality they had become. Carmen, this feels like you're trying to get rid of us. We thought we were welcome here as long as we needed to stay. As long as they needed to stay. They had been needing to stay for 13 months, while making no effort to improve their financial situation or reduce their dependence on my support. Their needs seemed to be permanent rather than temporary. I'm not trying to get rid of you, I explained patiently. I'm trying to help you establish independence and stability. Renting your own place would be a step toward financial responsibility, and eventual homeownership. But why can't we just stay here? Marcus asked. This house is plenty big for all of us, and we're all comfortable with the current arrangement. Comfortable. They were comfortable with an arrangement where I worked full-time to support 6 people, while they contributed nothing to their own welfare. Of course they were comfortable with that setup. Marcus, I need my space back. I need my privacy and my independence. Living with 6 people for over a year has been challenging, and I think it would be healthier for everyone if you had your own place. The manipulation tactics began immediately. Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she talked about how traumatic it would be for the children to move again. Marcus accused me of prioritizing money over family relationships. Both of them suggested that my desire for privacy was selfish and unreasonable. The kids love living here, Jessica sobbed. This is the most stable home they've ever had. You want to uproot them just so you can have your house to yourself? Carmen, I'm disappointed in you, Marcus said with genuine anger. Our parents would be ashamed to see you treating family this way. They raised us to take care of each other, not to charge each other rent like strangers. Our parents would be ashamed. Marcus was using our deceased parents as weapons in his manipulation campaign, suggesting that my reasonable boundaries violated the values we had been taught as children. Our parents would be proud that I'm helping you learn to be independent and self-sufficient, I replied. They wouldn't want you to become dependent on handouts for the rest of your life. The conversation deteriorated quickly from there. Marcus accused me of being greedy and materialistic. Jessica claimed I was breaking up their family for financial gain. Both of them suggested that my rental income meant I had been lying about the financial burden of supporting them. You've been acting like we're such a hardship, Jessica said accusingly. But you've had rental income this whole time. You could have easily afforded to support us without all the complaints and guilt trips. Guilt trips. I had been giving them guilt trips by expecting basic respect and consideration in my own home. Jessica, my rental income covers the mortgages and expenses on those properties. It's not extra money sitting around waiting to support 6 people indefinitely. But it's still income, Marcus argued. You've been acting like you're struggling financially when you actually have multiple income streams. The logic was so twisted that I struggled to respond coherently. Yes, I had rental income, but that income was earmarked for property expenses and reinvestment. It wasn't money I could ethically use to subsidize their lifestyle indefinitely. More importantly, the existence of rental income didn't change the fundamental problem with our arrangement. Marcus and Jessica were adults who should be contributing to their own support, rather than depending entirely on someone else's charity. When I tried to explain these concepts, their reactions revealed how completely they had embraced the victim mentality that justified their exploitation of my generosity. Carmen, you're talking about us like we're charity cases, Marcus said. We're your family. Family doesn't charge each other rent or talk about contributions and expenses. Marcus, what do you think family does? Do you think family just takes care of one person forever while that person contributes nothing? Family helps family during difficult times, Jessica said. We're going through a difficult time, and instead of supporting us, you're trying to profit from our situation. Profit from their situation. By offering them housing at $600 below market rates, I was somehow profiting from their difficult circumstances. The conversation ended with Marcus and Jessica refusing to consider renting the duplex and accusing me of being heartless and greedy. They retreated to their bedrooms, whispering angrily to each other about my unreasonable expectations and selfish demands. I sat alone in my living room that night, realizing that my generous offer had been interpreted as an attack on their comfortable lifestyle of total dependence. They had no interest in independence, responsibility, or contributing to their own welfare. They wanted to continue living rent-free in my house while I supported them indefinitely. The next morning brought a new level of hostility that made it clear how Marcus and Jessica really felt about me and my role in their lives. Instead of grateful family members who appreciated my support, they were angry consumers who felt entitled to my resources without any reciprocal obligations. I can't believe Carmen thinks she can just kick us out, I heard Jessica telling someone on the phone. After everything we've been through, she wants to charge us rent like we're strangers. It's disgusting how money changes people. Money changes people. The rental income I had earned through wise investments and careful planning had somehow changed me into a greedy person who was unreasonable for expecting adults to pay for their own housing. Marcus's phone conversations were equally revealing. My sister has become obsessed with money, he told his friend Danny. She's got rental properties and steady income, but she's acting like supporting her own family is some huge burden. I don't know what happened to her. What happened to me was 13 months of being exploited, manipulated, and taken for granted by people who showed no appreciation for my sacrifices and no interest in improving their own situation. But their refusal to consider the duplex rental had given me valuable information about their true intentions. They had no plans to become independent. They had no interest in contributing to their own support. They viewed my house as their permanent home and me as their permanent financial provider. This revelation crystallized my understanding of the situation. Marcus and Jessica weren't temporarily down on their luck. They were deliberately choosing dependence over independence, because dependence was more comfortable. They had found someone willing to support them completely, and they intended to exploit that arrangement for as long as possible. The question was no longer how to help them transition to independence. The question was how to protect myself from people who had no intention of ever contributing to their own welfare. Over the weekend, Marcus and Jessica's behavior became increasingly hostile and entitled. They seemed to believe that discovering my rental income had somehow changed the power dynamic in their favor, as if my financial stability obligated me to support them indefinitely. Carmen, since you're doing so well financially, maybe you could increase our allowances, Jessica suggested casually while I was making breakfast for everyone. Allowances. She was referring to the small amounts of cash I occasionally gave the children for school activities or treats. But she seemed to think these were regular payments that could be increased based on my financial capacity. Jessica, I don't give you or Marcus allowances. Sometimes I give the kids money for school things, but that's different. Well, maybe it's time to start giving us some spending money. We never have cash for anything fun, and it's depressing to be broke all the time. They were broke because they chose not to work, not because they were unable to earn money. But Jessica seemed to think my rental income created an obligation for me to provide them with entertainment funding. Marcus joined the conversation with his own financial requests. Carmen, my phone is getting old, and I really need a new one. Since you're doing well with your properties, maybe you could help me upgrade. Help him upgrade. Marcus wanted me to buy him a new phone because my investments were successful. He wasn't asking for a loan or offering to contribute to the household expenses in exchange. He was simply demanding that I purchase things for him based on my ability to afford them. Marcus, if you need a new phone, you should get a job and buy one yourself. Carmen, that's not fair. You know I'm still looking for work. I can't be expected to go without basic necessities while I'm job hunting. A new phone was a basic necessity that I should provide while he spent his days playing video games instead of actively seeking employment. The children began adopting their parents' entitled attitude toward my financial resources. Sofia announced that she needed a laptop for school projects, something that had never been mentioned by her teachers but had apparently become essential now that she knew I had rental income. All the other kids in my class have laptops, she said during dinner. It's embarrassing to be the only one without one. Miguel decided he needed expensive soccer cleats because the ones I had already purchased weren't the right brand. The good players all have these special cleats, he explained. If I'm going to improve my game, I need the right equipment. Emma began asking for toys and clothes that were far more expensive than anything I had previously bought for her. Aunt Carmen, can you buy me that dollhouse I saw at the store? It's only $200. Only $200 for a dollhouse for a 4-year-old, requested casually as if my rental income meant money was no longer a consideration for any purchases. Their demands escalated throughout the week, each request more presumptuous than the last. Jessica wanted a spa day to help her relax from the stress of being unemployed. Marcus thought I should lease him a better car so he could make a good impression during job interviews. The children compiled Christmas lists in July, filled with expensive electronics and designer clothing. Carmen, you should really consider getting a bigger house, Jessica suggested one evening. Now that we know you can afford it, we could all use more space. The kids are getting older, and they need their own rooms. A bigger house. Jessica wanted me to purchase a larger, more expensive home, so that her family could have more comfortable accommodations while contributing nothing to the mortgage or maintenance costs. "This house is perfect for me," I replied. "I don't need more space." "But what about us? Sofia and Emma are sharing a room, and Miguel doesn't have anywhere to put all his sports equipment. We could really use a house with 5 or 6 bedrooms. We could use a larger house." Jessica was including herself in my housing decisions, assuming that her family's comfort was my responsibility and that my financial capacity obligated me to provide them with upgraded accommodations. The level of entitlement was breathtaking, but it also clarified something important about the dynamic I had allowed to develop. Marcus and Jessica didn't see themselves as temporary guests who were grateful for my hospitality. They saw themselves as permanent residents who deserved accommodations based on my ability to provide them. I had created this monster by being too generous for too long without establishing clear boundaries and expectations. I had allowed them to move from appreciation to expectation to entitlement without ever requiring them to contribute to their own welfare. But monsters can be defeated by people who understand their true nature and have the resources to fight back. Marcus and Jessica had made a crucial error in revealing their long-term intentions. They had shown me that they would never voluntarily leave my house or start contributing to household expenses. They had also underestimated my intelligence and my resources. They thought I was a soft-hearted sister and aunt who could be manipulated indefinitely through guilt trips and emotional blackmail. They didn't realize that I was a businesswoman who understood contracts, leases, and legal rights. Most importantly, they had forgotten that I was the homeowner, and they were essentially squatters who had been allowed to stay out of kindness rather than legal obligation. On Wednesday evening, I had a moment of perfect clarity while watching Marcus and Jessica argue about what kind of vacation we should all take together using my rental income. They were planning to spend my money on a family trip that would benefit them while contributing nothing to the costs. "I think we should go somewhere tropical," Jessica was saying. "The kids would love to see the ocean, and Marcus and I really need some time to relax and reconnect." "That sounds expensive," Marcus replied. "Maybe we should start with something local and work up to bigger trips as Carmen's rental income increases." As my rental income increases. They were making long-term financial plans based on my assets, treating my income as their income and my resources as their resources. That's when I realized that I had been approaching this situation all wrong. I had been trying to help Marcus and Jessica when I should have been protecting myself from them. I had been focusing on their needs when I should have been prioritizing my own rights and well-being. I wasn't their benefactor or their caretaker. I was their victim. And victims have the right to stop being victims whenever they choose to fight back. The plan that formed in my mind was so simple and so perfect that I wondered why it had taken me so long to see it. Marcus and Jessica had been living in my house for 13 months without paying rent, contributing to expenses, or signing any kind of formal agreement. They were tenants without a lease, which meant they had very few legal protections compared to renters with proper documentation. In California, tenants without written leases are considered month-to-month renters, who can be evicted with 30 days notice if they're not paying rent. Since Marcus and Jessica had never paid me a single dollar for housing, utilities, or any other expenses, they were essentially squatters who could be legally removed from my property. I spent Thursday evening researching the exact legal requirements for evicting non-paying tenants in Sacramento County. The process was straightforward. Serve a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, followed by a 30-day notice to vacate if they couldn't pay the back rent they owed. Calculating the back rent was interesting. Market rate for a 4-bedroom house in my neighborhood was approximately $3,500 per month. 13 months of unpaid rent at market rates totaled $45,500, plus utilities, which averaged about $400 monthly for the additional usage created by 4 extra people. That brought the total to nearly $51,000 in unpaid housing costs. Even if I charged them the discounted family rate I had offered for the duplex, $2,200 monthly for 13 months would total $28,600 plus utilities. Marcus and Jessica owed me a minimum of $28,600 in back rent. money they clearly couldn't pay since they had been unemployed for over a year and had no assets or savings. The 3-day notice would give them the option to pay this debt immediately or vacate the property. When they inevitably couldn't pay, the 30-day notice would require them to leave by a specific date or face formal eviction proceedings. It was perfect, legal, straightforward, and impossible for them to fight, since they had no written lease agreement and no history of paying rent. They would finally face the consequences of their exploitation and entitlement. But I decided to add one more element to my plan, something that would make the situation even more clear to Marcus and Jessica. Along with the eviction notices, I would serve them with invoices for all the expenses they had created over the past 13 months. I spent Friday evening calculating every cost their presence had generated: increased grocery bills, utility overages, household supplies, transportation expenses, childcare costs, entertainment expenses, and the credit card charges Jessica had made without permission. The total was staggering. Between unpaid rent, utilities, and other expenses, Marcus and Jessica had cost me nearly $60,000 over 13 months. $60,000 that I had provided out of kindness and family loyalty while they contributed nothing and demanded more. The invoices would show them exactly how much their temporary stay had actually cost, and the eviction notices would give them a clear choice: pay what they owed or leave my property immediately. Saturday morning, I drove to a legal services office and had the notices professionally prepared and notarized. The documents were official, legally binding, and absolutely airtight. Marcus and Jessica would have no legal recourse and no legitimate grounds for appeal. As I drove home with the eviction notices in a manila envelope on my passenger seat, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a year: control. For 13 months, I had been reactive, responding to their demands and trying to manage their behavior. Now I was taking action to protect my own interests and reclaim my own life. Marcus and Jessica had taught me an important lesson about the difference between helping someone and enabling them. Helping someone means providing temporary assistance while they work to improve their situation. Enabling someone means providing permanent support while they make no effort to become self-sufficient. I had been enabling Marcus and Jessica for 13 months, and they had responded by becoming increasingly entitled and demanding. They had shown me that they preferred dependence to independence and exploitation to reciprocity. Now it was time for them to learn that my kindness had limits, my patience had boundaries, and my house had rules that included paying rent like every other adult in the world. The eviction notices were going to be delivered Monday morning, giving Marcus and Jessica exactly 3 days to pay $51,000 in back rent or begin packing their belongings. I was finally ready to stop being their victim and start being their landlord. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that comes when you finally stop avoiding difficult decisions. I had woken up at 5:30, showered, dressed in my most professional business attire, and prepared myself for the confrontation that would change everything. The manila envelope containing the eviction notices sat on my kitchen counter like a declaration of independence. Marcus and Jessica were still asleep when I left for work at 7, which was typical since they had no employment obligations requiring them to maintain normal schedules. The children were getting themselves ready for school, another responsibility that had gradually shifted to them as their parents became increasingly comfortable with their unemployed lifestyle. I had strategically planned to serve the notices when I returned from work that evening, giving myself a full day to mentally prepare, while ensuring that Marcus and Jessica would have no time to concoct elaborate manipulation schemes before we had our conversation. The anticipation made it difficult to concentrate at work, but I forced myself to focus on my regular responsibilities. This was my last day of being the victim in this situation. Tomorrow I would wake up as the homeowner who had taken control of her property and her life. At exactly 5:15, I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, staring at the house that had become a source of stress instead of sanctuary. Through the windows, I could see the warm light of my living room where Marcus was undoubtedly watching television, while Jessica scrolled through social media. The children were probably scattered throughout the house, doing homework or playing games in the spaces they had claimed as their own. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost as a family. The early weeks when everyone was grateful and respectful seemed like a distant memory. The potential for healthy relationships had been destroyed by their greed and my enabling behavior. But the sadness was quickly replaced by determination. I was about to reclaim my peace, my privacy, and my financial security. I was about to teach my family that exploitation has consequences, and kindness shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. I walked through my front door carrying the manila envelope in my briefcase, projecting the calm confidence of someone who had finally found her backbone. Marcus called out from the living room without bothering to look up from his show. "Carmen, could you grab me a beer from the fridge while you're in the kitchen?" The casual entitlement in his request was so typical that I almost laughed. Even now, with eviction notices in my hand, Marcus assumed I existed to serve his needs and fulfill his requests. "Marcus, Jessica, could you both come into the dining room, please? I need to discuss something important with you." The formal tone of my voice must have registered because Jessica appeared from the kitchen immediately, her expression curious but not yet concerned. Marcus took longer to respond, sighing dramatically about having to pause his program before joining us at the dining room table. "What's this about?" Jessica asked, settling into the chair she had claimed as her regular spot at my dinner table. I placed the manila envelope on the table between us and opened it slowly, removing the professionally prepared documents with deliberate ceremony. The sight of official legal paperwork immediately changed the energy in the room. Marcus leaned forward, frowning at the papers. "Carmen, what is this?" "These are eviction notices," I said calmly, sliding copies across the table to each of them. "You have 3 days to pay the back rent you owe, or vacate the premises within 30 days. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language, while Marcus's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and rising anger. "Back rent?" Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. "Carmen, what are you talking about? We're family. We don't pay rent. You've been living in my house for 13 months without contributing to housing costs," I explained, maintaining the professional tone I had practiced. "Market rate for a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood is $3,500 monthly. 13 months of unpaid rent totals $45,500. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, causing the papers to jump. "Carmen, this is insane. You can't charge your own brother rent retroactively. That's not how family works." "Actually, Marcus, this is exactly how rental agreements work. Tenants pay landlords for housing. The fact that you're my brother doesn't exempt you from this basic adult responsibility." Jessica was scanning the eviction notice with growing panic. "Carmen, you can't be serious about this. Where would we go? What about the children?" The mention of the children was clearly intended to activate my guilt and sympathy, but I had prepared for this manipulation tactic. "Jessica, you and Marcus are adults who should have been planning for your housing needs over the past year, instead of assuming you could live here indefinitely." "But we thought we were welcome here," Marcus protested. "You never said anything about paying rent before now. I never said anything about you living here permanently either. You asked for temporary help, and I provided it. 13 months later, you're still here with no plans to become independent." The documents I had prepared were comprehensive and devastating. In addition to the eviction notices, I had included itemized invoices for utilities, groceries, was undoubtedly watching television, while Jessica scrolled through social media. The children were probably scattered throughout the house, doing homework or playing games in the spaces they had claimed as their own. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost as a family. The early weeks when everyone was grateful and respectful seemed like a distant memory. The potential for healthy relationships had been destroyed by their greed and my enabling behavior. But the sadness was quickly replaced by determination. I was about to reclaim my peace, my privacy, and my financial security. I was about to teach my family that exploitation has consequences, and kindness shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. I walked through my front door carrying the manila envelope in my briefcase, projecting the calm confidence of someone who had finally found her backbone. Marcus called out from the living room without bothering to look up from his show. "Carmen, could you grab me a beer from the fridge while you're in the kitchen?" The casual entitlement in his request was so typical that I almost laughed. Even now, with eviction notices in my hand, Marcus assumed I existed to serve his needs and fulfill his requests. Marcus, Jessica, could you both come into the dining room, please? I need to discuss something important with you. The formal tone of my voice must have registered because Jessica appeared from the kitchen immediately, her expression curious but not yet concerned. Marcus took longer to respond, sighing dramatically about having to pause his program before joining us at the dining room table. What's this about? Jessica asked, settling into the chair she had claimed as her regular spot at my dinner table. I placed the manila envelope on the table between us and opened it slowly, removing the professionally prepared documents with deliberate ceremony. The sight of official legal paperwork immediately changed the energy in the room. Marcus leaned forward, frowning at the papers. Carmen, what is this? These are eviction notices, I said calmly, sliding copies across the table to each of them. You have 3 days to pay the back rent you owe, or vacate the premises within 30 days. The silence that followed was profound. Jessica stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language, while Marcus's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and rising anger. Back rent? Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. Carmen, what are you talking about? We're family. We don't pay rent. You've been living in my house for 13 months without contributing to housing costs, I explained, maintaining the professional tone I had practiced. Market rate for a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood is $3,500 monthly. 13 months of unpaid rent totals $45,500. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, causing the papers to jump. Carmen, this is insane. You can't charge your own brother rent retroactively. That's not how family works. Actually, Marcus, this is exactly how rental agreements work. Tenants pay landlords for housing. The fact that you're my brother doesn't exempt you from this basic adult responsibility. Jessica was scanning the eviction notice with growing panic. Carmen, you can't be serious about this. Where would we go? What about the children? The mention of the children was clearly intended to activate my guilt and sympathy, but I had prepared for this manipulation tactic. Jessica, you and Marcus are adults who should have been planning for your housing needs over the past year, instead of assuming you could live here indefinitely. But we thought we were welcome here, Marcus protested. You never said anything about paying rent before now. I never said anything about you living here permanently either. You asked for temporary help, and I provided it. 13 months later, you're still here with no plans to become independent. The documents I had prepared were comprehensive and devastating. In addition to the eviction notices, I had included itemized invoices for utilities, groceries, studying the eviction notices while Jessica orchestrated the emotional manipulation. Carmen, these papers say we have 3 days to pay, or 30 days to move out. That's not enough time to find a place and come up with deposits and moving expenses. Marcus, you've had 13 months to prepare for this transition. The timeline seems unreasonable, only because you chose not to plan for independence. Where are we supposed to get $60,000 in 3 days? Jessica demanded, referencing the combined total of back rent and expenses. You're not supposed to get $60,000. You're supposed to accept that you can't afford to live here and make arrangements for housing you can actually pay for. The desperation in their voices was becoming more pronounced as the reality of their situation sank in. For over a year, they had lived without financial responsibility or consequences for their choices. The eviction notices were forcing them to confront adult realities they had successfully avoided. Carmen, please, Marcus begged. Give us more time. I'll find a job, I promise. We'll start contributing to expenses. Marcus, you've had 13 months to find employment. You've shown no serious effort to improve your situation because you've been comfortable living off my charity. That's not fair, Jessica protested. The job market is terrible. It's not our fault that we haven't found work. Jessica, the job market didn't prevent you from throwing expensive birthday parties or signing the children up for costly activities. You've had time and energy for everything except actually working. The conversation continued for another hour, with Marcus and Jessica cycling through every manipulation tactic they had perfected over the past year. They promised to change their behavior, threatened to involve other family members in our dispute, accused me of being heartless and greedy, and repeatedly used the children as emotional weapons. But I had mentally prepared for all of these strategies, and my resolve remained unshakable. The eviction notices were legally binding, professionally prepared, and absolutely enforceable. Marcus and Jessica had no legal recourse and no legitimate grounds for appeal. "This is really happening," Jessica said finally, the reality penetrating her denial. "You're actually going to evict your own family. I'm going to enforce reasonable expectations for adults living in my house," I corrected. "If that results in eviction, it's because you've chosen not to meet those expectations." Marcus tried one last appeal to family loyalty. "Carmen, our parents would be ashamed of you for treating family this way. Our parents would be ashamed of you for exploiting family generosity and refusing to support your own children," I replied without hesitation. "They raised us to be responsible, independent adults, not permanent dependents." The evening ended with Marcus and Jessica retreating to their bedrooms to plot their next moves, whispering angrily about my betrayal and unreasonable demands. The children were confused and upset, but I knew that removing them from this toxic dynamic would ultimately benefit their development. Tuesday morning brought the first attempts at negotiation and compromise. Marcus appeared in my kitchen while I was making coffee, his approach more humble than I had seen in months. "Carmen, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. Maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan for the back rent?" "What kind of payment plan, Marcus?" "Well, maybe I could pay you $100 a month until the debt is paid off. That would show good faith that I'm serious about taking responsibility. $100 monthly would require 455 months to pay off $45,500 in back rent. 37 years of payments that would likely never materialize since Marcus had shown no ability to generate income. Marcus, $100 monthly doesn't even cover the interest on the debt you've accumulated. That's not a serious proposal. Okay, maybe $200 a month? I really think I'm close to finding a job, and once I'm working, I could increase the payments." $200 monthly would still require over 18 years to pay off the debt, assuming Marcus could maintain steady employment and actually honor his commitment to make payments. "Marcus, these payment plans assume you'll find employment and maintain it consistently for decades. Your track record doesn't support that assumption." Jessica joined the conversation with her own version of negotiation. "Carmen, what if we agreed to pay market rate rent going forward? We could sign a lease and start fresh with monthly payments." "What about the $60,000 you already owe?" "Well, maybe we could consider that a family gift? You know, help that you gave voluntarily to relatives who needed support?" "A family gift." Jessica wanted me to forgive $60,000 in debt so they could start over with a clean slate while contributing nothing to resolve the financial damage they had caused. "Jessica, gifts are voluntary. I didn't volunteer to support 6 people for over a year. You took advantage of my kindness and assumed I would never hold you accountable." Wednesday brought more desperate attempts to avoid the consequences of their choices. Marcus appeared with printed job applications, claiming he was finally serious about finding employment. "Look, Carmen, I've applied to 15 jobs just today. Construction, retail, restaurant work, anything that's available. I'm really committed to changing our situation." "Marcus, where were these job applications for the past 13 months?" "I was being too picky before, only applying for jobs that matched my experience level. Now I understand that I need to take whatever work I can find." The sudden urgency about employment was clearly motivated by fear of eviction, rather than genuine commitment to supporting his family. If Marcus had shown this level of effort months ago, we might have avoided the current crisis. Jessica tried emotional manipulation, bringing Emma into the kitchen while tears streamed down her face. "Carmen, look at this baby. Look at her innocent face. Are you really going to make her homeless because her parents are going through a hard time?" Using a 4-year-old as a prop in her manipulation campaign was a new low, even for Jessica. Emma looked confused and frightened by her mother's tears and dramatic behavior. "Jessica, Emma isn't going to be homeless. You're going to find appropriate housing for your family, just like millions of other parents do every day." "But where? We don't have deposits or first month's rent saved up. We don't have good credit or employment history. Nobody's going to rent to us." "Then you should have been planning for this transition, instead of assuming you could live here forever." Thursday brought the involvement of extended family members, exactly as I had predicted. Jessica had called her mother, her sister, and several cousins, telling them her version of events and recruiting them to pressure me into changing my decision. My phone rang constantly with calls from relatives who had never shown interest in our situation when I was supporting 6 people by myself, but suddenly had strong opinions about my heartless treatment of Marcus and Jessica. "Carmen, this is your Aunt Maria," the first call began. "Jessica called me crying about how you're evicting them. I can't believe you would treat family this way." "Aunt Maria, did Jessica mention that they've been living rent-free in my house for 13 months while I paid all their expenses?" "Well, yes, but that's what family does. We help each other during difficult times." "Did she mention that neither she nor Marcus has looked for work seriously or contributed anything to household expenses?" "Carmen, jobs are hard to find these days. You can't blame them for struggling in this economy." The extended family members had received carefully edited versions of our situation that painted me as the villain who was destroying a struggling family for financial gain. None of them had heard about the credit card theft, the entitled demands, or the complete lack of effort Marcus and Jessica had shown toward improving their circumstances. "Carmen, this is Jessica's sister, Rachel. I'm calling to ask you to reconsider this eviction. The children don't deserve to suffer because their parents are having problems." "Rachel, the children are suffering now because their parents refuse to take responsibility for supporting them. Moving to an appropriate living situation might actually benefit their development. But you have rental income from other properties. You don't need their money to survive." The logic was maddening. Because I had been successful with investments and maintained multiple income streams, I was somehow obligated to support indefinitely a family of 5, who contributed nothing to their own welfare. Friday arrived with no resolution and no signs that Marcus and Jessica intended to comply with the eviction notices. Instead, they had spent the week trying to manipulate me through guilt, false promises, and pressure from other family members. That evening, I served them with additional paperwork: formal 30-day notices to quit the premises and information about tenant rights and eviction procedures in California. The documents made it clear that their time in my house was ending whether they cooperated or not. "Carmen, you're really going through with this," Marcus said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Yes, Marcus. Your 3 days to pay the back rent have expired, so now you have 30 days to vacate the property." "What if we refuse to leave?" Jessica asked defiantly. "What if we just stay here and force you to go through formal eviction proceedings? Then I'll file unlawful detainer actions in court, obtain judgments against you, and have the sheriff physically remove you from my property. The eviction will appear on your credit reports and make it much more difficult for you to rent anywhere else. The formal eviction process would take additional time and cost me money in legal fees, but it would permanently damage their ability to rent housing elsewhere. Most landlords refuse to rent to tenants with eviction histories, especially recent ones." "You would really do that to your own family?" Marcus asked. "I would really enforce my legal rights as a property owner when tenants refuse to pay rent or vacate my premises when required." Saturday brought a visit from Child Protective Services, summoned by an anonymous caller who reported that children were being displaced from their home due to an adult's financial greed. The social worker who appeared at my door was professional but clearly skeptical about the situation. "Ms. Rodriguez, we received a report that you're evicting a family with children for financial reasons. Can you explain the circumstances?" I invited the social worker inside and provided her with copies of all the documentation: the eviction notices, the invoices for unpaid expenses, and the timeline of Marcus and Jessica's 13-month stay in my house. "These adults have been living rent-free in my home for over a year while I've supported their entire family," I explained. "I'm requiring them to pay for housing like any other tenants." The social worker reviewed the paperwork carefully, noting the substantial debt Marcus and Jessica had accumulated, and their complete lack of financial contribution to their own support. "Ms. Rodriguez, it appears you've been extraordinarily generous with your family. Requiring adults to pay rent is not unreasonable, and you've given them appropriate notice to make other arrangements. The person who called you probably didn't mention that these adults haven't worked or contributed anything to their own children's welfare for over a year." After interviewing Marcus and Jessica separately, the social worker concluded that the children were not in immediate danger and that my expectations were reasonable. She provided Marcus and Jessica with information about housing assistance programs and job training resources, but took no action to prevent the eviction. The caller seemed to think you were displacing children for profit, the social worker told me privately. But it's clear that you've been supporting this family far beyond what anyone could reasonably expect. Sunday evening, with less than 24 hours remaining before the 30-day notice expired, Marcus and Jessica finally accepted that their situation was hopeless. They couldn't pay the debt they owed, they couldn't legally remain in my house, and they couldn't manipulate me into backing down from my position. "Fine, Carmen," Jessica said with bitter resignation. "You win. We'll be out of here by tomorrow night." "Where will you go?" Jessica's mother said we can stay with her temporarily while we figure out our next steps, Marcus replied. "It's going to be crowded, but at least we won't be on the street." Jessica's mother lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment across town. Housing 5 additional people in that space would be extremely uncomfortable, but it would give them time to apply for housing assistance and look for employment without the pressure of homelessness. "I hope you're happy," Jessica continued. "You've broken up this family and traumatized 3 innocent children just to prove a point about money. I've taught you that adults are responsible for supporting themselves and their children. I hope you'll use this experience to motivate positive changes in your approach to work and financial responsibility." Monday morning brought the moving trucks and the end of an era. Marcus and Jessica had rented a small U-Haul and recruited friends to help pack their belongings. The process was chaotic and emotional, with the children crying about leaving their rooms and toys behind. I watched from my home office window as they loaded furniture I had allowed them to use, clothes I had helped them purchase, and toys I had bought for the children over the past 13 months. The total value of everything they were taking probably exceeded $5,000, but I didn't dispute their right to keep these items. Sofia appeared at my office door one last time, her 8-year-old face streaked with tears. "Aunt Carmen, I'm going to miss you so much. I wish things could go back to the way they were." "I'm going to miss you too, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions to help their families learn important lessons." "Will we still see you sometimes?" "Of course. You're always welcome to visit, and I'll always love you very much." Miguel and Emma also said their goodbyes, their confusion about the adult dynamics evident in their questions about why families couldn't just live together forever. I tried to explain in age-appropriate terms that parents need to take care of their own children, and that living together permanently hadn't been working well for the adults. Marcus appeared in my doorway last, his expression a mixture of anger and defeat. "Carmen, I hope you understand what you've done here. You've chosen money over family, and that's something you'll have to live with." "Marcus, I've chosen self-respect over exploitation. I hope you'll use this experience to become the man and father your children deserve. Don't lecture me about being a father. I've been doing everything I can to provide for my family. Everything except working to support them financially, or showing appreciation for the person who has been providing for them." Jessica refused to speak to me directly, loading the last of their belongings while pointedly ignoring my presence. Her final act was to leave a handwritten note on my kitchen counter, expressing her hope that I would someday understand the damage I had caused and feel appropriate guilt for my selfish decisions. As the U-Haul pulled out of my driveway and disappeared down the street, I stood in my empty house experiencing a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the toxic dynamic was finally over, sadness that family relationships had deteriorated so completely, guilt about the impact on the children, but above all a profound sense of freedom and self-respect that I hadn't felt in over a year. That evening, I walked through every room of my house, reacquainting myself with the space that belonged entirely to me. I adjusted the thermostat to exactly the temperature I preferred. I rearranged the furniture to suit my personal taste. I cleaned out the refrigerator and restocked it with food I wanted to eat. For the first time in 13 months, I cooked dinner for one person, ate it at whatever time I chose, and cleaned up after only myself. The silence was profound and beautiful. Over the following weeks, I began to rebuild my life according to my own preferences and priorities. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during the family crisis. I resumed hobbies and activities that had been impossible with 6 people in my house. I started sleeping through the night without being awakened by other people's noise and needs. The financial recovery was remarkably quick. Without supporting 6 people, my monthly expenses dropped dramatically. The money I had been spending on groceries, utilities, and miscellaneous family costs went directly into savings and investments. My rental properties continued generating steady income, and I began looking for additional investment opportunities. Marcus and Jessica's attempts to maintain contact were sporadic and largely unsuccessful. They called occasionally to ask for loans or assistance with various crises, but I maintained firm boundaries about not resuming my role as their financial provider. Carmen, Jessica lost her job at the restaurant after only 2 weeks. Marcus called to report 6 weeks after they moved out. Could you help us with rent for Jessica's mother's place? Marcus, Jessica finding and keeping employment is her responsibility, not mine. But we're really struggling. The kids are having a hard time adjusting to the new living situation. Then you and Jessica need to find solutions that don't involve asking me for money. 3 months later, Jessica called to report that they had been approved for a subsidized apartment but needed help with the security deposit. Carmen, it's only $800, and this would give us a real fresh start. Jessica, saving money for deposits and moving costs is part of being a responsible adult. I'm not going to fund your housing transitions. But we're family. Families help each other. Families also respect boundaries and take responsibility for themselves. The children called occasionally, and I always made time to talk with them. Their voices revealed the stress of their unstable living situation, but they also began to show signs of increased maturity and responsibility as their parents were forced to become more functional. And Carmen, I got an A on my science project. Sofia called to report proudly. Mom and Dad couldn't help me with it, so I did most of it myself. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for working so hard. It was kind of scary to do it alone, but I felt really good when I finished it. Sofia was learning that she could accomplish difficult tasks independently, a lesson that would serve her well throughout her life. The experience of watching her parents struggle with adult responsibilities was teaching her the importance of education, hard work, and financial planning. 6 months after the eviction, I received a Christmas card from the children with a note from Marcus acknowledging that their situation had stabilized somewhat. He had found steady work in construction, Jessica was employed part-time at a retail store, and they were managing to pay their own rent and expenses. Carmen, I still think you handled the situation badly, but I have to admit that being forced to support ourselves has made us stronger as a family. The kids have learned to be more independent, and Jessica and I have had to step up in ways we hadn't before. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement that the tough love approach had produced positive results. Marcus and Jessica were finally functioning as adults who supported their own children rather than dependent relatives who expected someone else to handle their responsibilities. A year later, the children's annual school pictures arrived in my mailbox with a note from Sofia. Aunt Carmen, we're doing well in our new apartment. Dad has been promoted at his job, and Mom is learning to be a top manager at her store. I miss living with you, but I'm proud of how our family is taking care of itself now. The pride in Sofia's voice when she talked about her family's self-sufficiency was worth every difficult moment of the eviction process. She was learning that independence and hard work were sources of dignity and satisfaction rather than burdens to be avoided. 2 years after the eviction, Marcus called with news that they had saved enough money to make a down payment on a small house. Carmen, I wanted you to know that we're going to be homeowners. It's a tiny place, but it's ours. I'm proud of you, Marcus. That's a major accomplishment. I have to admit, learning to manage money and pay our own bills has been good for us. The kids understand the value of hard work now, and Jessica and I have a better relationship because we're working together toward goals. The conversation was the closest Marcus had ever come to acknowledging that the eviction had been necessary and beneficial. He didn't apologize for the exploitation or manipulation, but he recognized that being forced to take responsibility had improved their family dynamics and financial stability. 3 years later, I received an invitation to Sofia's middle school graduation. She had earned honors recognition and a scholarship to a private high school based on her academic achievements and community service. Aunt Carmen, I hope you'll come to my graduation, she wrote. I know things were complicated when we lived with you, but I've learned a lot about working hard and taking responsibility for myself. I think you would be proud of the person I'm becoming. I attended the graduation ceremony and watched my niece accept her awards with genuine pride, The confused 8-year-old who had cried about leaving my house had become a confident 13-year-old who understood the value of personal achievement and self-reliance. During the reception afterward, Marcus and Jessica were polite but distant. We spoke briefly about Sofia's accomplishments and the family's continued progress, but the warmth and closeness we had once shared was gone forever. "Carmen, thank you for coming today," Jessica said formally. "Sofia was so excited that you would be here for her special day. I wouldn't miss it. She's become a remarkable young woman. We're very proud of how well all the kids are doing in school and their activities." The conversation was cordial but superficial, lacking the emotional intimacy that had once characterized our family relationships. The eviction had saved my sanity and financial security, but it had permanently altered the dynamics between us. As I drove home from the graduation ceremony, I reflected on the lessons learned from this painful experience. I had discovered that generosity without boundaries becomes enabling, that family relationships require mutual respect and reciprocity to remain healthy, that people will exploit kindness indefinitely unless consequences force them to change their behavior. Most importantly, I had learned that protecting myself from exploitation wasn't selfish or cruel. It was necessary for maintaining my own well-being and ultimately beneficial for the people I had been enabling. The eviction notices had changed all of our lives. Marcus and Jessica had been forced to develop the skills and work ethic they should have possessed as adults. The children had learned valuable lessons about responsibility, independence, and the importance of contributing to their own welfare. And I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my self-respect, while maintaining the financial security that allowed me to help others in healthier ways. My house was peaceful again, filled with my own choices and priorities rather than other people's demands and chaos. My bank account was stable, my credit was intact, and my future was entirely under my own control. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their dysfunction and force them to face the consequences of their choices. Sometimes love means saying no and holding boundaries even when it causes temporary pain. The eviction notices had been the best investment I ever made in my family's future, even though it took years for some of them to understand why. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.